Okay, hello everyone. Today I'll be talking to you about CV and resume writing. So for today's agenda, I'll be going over the difference between CVs and resumes, components of CVs and resumes, how do you write your experience descriptions, and then ending with a summary and questions like usual. Okay, so in the US, we use both the terms resume and CV or curricula vitae. But what we call a resume in the US is usually what other countries would call a CV, and CVs in the US have a different meaning, which I will explain in the next slide. So resumes are used usually for academic and non-academic audiences, especially for job applications. They're usually 1 to 2 pages long and include your relevant work experience, knowledge, skills, and accomplishments. CVs are usually only reserved for academic audiences, and especially when you're applying for faculty positions at universities. CVs include your academic and intellectual background and accomplishments. For example, any like research publications, classes you taught, or were a teaching assistant for, and conference presentations. CVs are usually a lot longer than 1 to 2 pages. They don't have any page restrictions like resumes do. And the longer your academic career is, the longer your CV will be. So CVs can be anywhere from like 10 pages to over 40 pages long. And when you're applying to universities, they'll most likely be asking for either resume or CV. Most will give you the option of either submitting one or the other. So in most cases, you won't have to submit only a resume or only a CV. You get the option to choose either one in most cases. So on the left is an example of a resume, and on the right is an example of a CV. So in terms of content, resumes are different from CVs because the main focus is on your professional skills and work history, but it can still include some academic information, like what degrees you've received, for example. CVs have an academic focus, an explicit academic focus, and include things like courses, publications, presentations, and teaching experience, which are usually not things that are included or things that are seen on resumes. Okay, so now I'll be moving on to the second part of the presentation, which is about what actually goes into your resume or your CV. There are three major things that go in a resume or a CV, and that is your contact information, your content, which is going to be the bulk of your resume or your CV, and then descriptions of current or past jobs, experiences, and positions. So your name, first and last name, should always be at the top of your resume or your CV. In the US, it is also acceptable to include email, any links to either e-portfolios, professional networking site profiles, like your LinkedIn, for example, or other professional websites. So, for example, if you have like a self-owned business, that's a link you could include at the header with your contact information. Phone numbers are optional to include. You can include them, you cannot include them. Either option is fine. In the US, you do not need to include your address, a photo of yourself, and any links to any non-professional social media profiles. For example, if you have like a personal Instagram account, you wouldn't include that in your contact information section. If you do have a business Instagram account, that might be something that you could include though. So there are three subsections that make up your resume content specifically. Those are your education, your work experience, and then additional qualifications like language or volunteering experience. Since CVs are supposed to showcase all of your relevant academic experience, There are usually more components to complete than you would for a resume. So like a resume, you'll be including your education, but you'll also be including any relevant research and or teaching experience that you have. If you have both, then you would include both. If you have one or the other, then you would just include that. You also would include any publications and any presentations that you've done, specifically conference presentations. So not just like a random like in-class presentation, specifically presentations at like academic or professional conferences. You would also include any awards that you received, so awards, honors, fellowships, that kind of stuff you would include in your CV. Any professional training and affiliation. So if you have research certification, for example, that would be in your CV. If you are a member of certain professional organizations that are related to your field of study, that's something that would also be included in your CV as an affiliation. And then you would also include any volunteer work that you've done that's related to your field, either, and that could be volunteer work that you've either done at the university or with a university, with a specific department, or with a specific organization that's related to your field of study. And that would be either like university department or professional service. So your education is usually what goes after your name and contact information. Some people have their education at the end, which is an acceptable way to format your resume, but typically people put it after the contact information. So the standard format for writing your education experience is to have the full name of your high school, college, or undergraduate or graduate university on the left, and include the full name of your diploma or degree received. So for example, instead of writing BA in economics, you would write Bachelor of Arts in Economics. And then below that, you would include any minors, specializations, or concentrations. So for example, you would have above um, Bachelors of Arts in Political Science, and then below concentration, Western and Central Asian Regional Studies. And then across from that, or below that, you would, if it's applicable, you would also have a thesis or a dissertation that you've done included in your education section as well. You can include GPA, but that's optional and it's only really recommended to include if your GPA was high or if you graduated with either honors or distinction. And then on the right, you'll include across from the name of the school, the month and the year that you either expect to receive your degree if you're in the process of receiving the degree, or the month and the year that you did receive the degree if you've already graduated from the university and you've already received the degree. Okay, so this is an example of my resume during my first year of undergraduate school. So back then, I thought that you had to include your address in the contact information, but now I know that due to some recent changes in the landscape surrounding career documents in the US, you don't really need to include your address anymore, especially if you have concerns about privacy. In the case of submitting applications to universities, they'll probably already most likely have your address. Um, they probably would have had to ask for your address earlier in the process at some point anyway. So you don't really need to have it on your resume when you're applying to universities or to employers either. Phone numbers, like I said, are optional. I personally don't include my phone number and only include my email as the primary way to contact me on resumes. And that's really something that depends on whether or not you actually use your phone to communicate with employers or not. I don't, so I don't have my phone number. Email is really the best way to contact me, especially in terms of like jobs or university um, application notifications. So that's why I don't have my phone number. And then for graduate and postgraduate students, you should only include any universities where you received your undergraduate or graduate degrees at. So you wouldn't include anything completed before that. So like a high school diploma wouldn't be included in your education section. And then using the format that I have on the slide is okay, but not really recommended. I would recommend removing the parentheses and then adding the specific months that you start your studies and then the specific months that you end them. And if you are still in the middle of completing your studies, changing that from the month and then the year to current. So instead of leaving the space blank, you would write current in the space. And then you should have the full name of your degree written out, Bachelor's of Arts, like I mentioned earlier, and then having your concentrations or minors. In the case of my bachelor's degree, I had concentrations. Those should be underneath the name of my degree. So Bachelor's of Arts in Foreign Languages, and International Affairs, and then the next line would be concentrations, Russian and Chinese. And then I also recommend having your dates moved as far to the right as possible so that everything is perfectly lined up, completely straight. And then this is an example of one of my more recent resumes. It has the date format that I recommend using, so month and year. And then you're supposed to, well, I recommend having the full name of the month written out as opposed to having the shortened version. So for example, December, the whole month is written out instead of just DEC. So I also make sure that my name stands out. It's in black and then the font size is larger than my contact information and larger than my education, or really the rest of my resume. So, um, yeah, so make sure that stands out, and that should be like the first thing that people see when they read your resume. Actually, is your name. And then I also included links to my email and professional profile and website. You should also use the same format for all of your degrees. So one thing that you want to make sure of when you're writing your or completing your resume or CV is that your format is consistent. So like I showing on the slide, the format that I have for my education section is consistent. So name of the university, location, the name of the degree, and then below that, any specializations or minors. And then if it's applicable, which in my case it's not, underneath that, I would have the name of my thesis or dissertation. So after education, you'll include your work or job or research or teaching experience. Information is, in my opinion, or my recommendation, included in this order. First, the work or job or research or teaching title category. So for example, teaching experience or research experience or leadership experience, for example. And then you would have the name of the position, for example, teaching assistant, and then the name of the organization or school that you completed that position at. And then you would have how long you worked that position. So the month you started and the year dash. And then if you're still working in that position, you would write current. If you completed that position, you would have the month and the year that you finished that position. And then it's optional. It really depends on how you format the information. But you can also include the specific department of the organization or the specific department of the university or school where you completed that position. This bit of information is included after your position title and is particularly helpful to include if you've had multiple positions at one specific place or one specific university or school or college. And then how you organize and format this information varies. There isn't one right way to organize your uh, relevant work or job or research or teaching experience. So this is a standard resume template that you can find online. I recommend designing your own resume template, but you can definitely use online templates as inspiration or to get ideas. Um, Overall, your resume should be completely unique to you, so it shouldn't really be something that is generic or something that it looks like somebody else might have produced. If your goal when you're designing your resume and your CV and applying to university should be to stand out as an applicant. So design your own resume is a way to do that. And so this template, it has all the components that I've mentioned. But it has a very common and very unspecific job category. This one lists the company name first and then the position, but it doesn't include the location. So it doesn't include where the position was completed. And you'll see it doesn't write out the full month and the year. So it has the shortened versions of the month that I mentioned earlier. And it doesn't actually write out the full year either. And my recommendation is to write out the full month and the full year. So for example, July 2019 instead of June and then 19. So this resume example also has another common job title, but it's more specific than the previous example. Uh, One recommendation that I have is to separate your job categories. So in this example, work and leadership experience are put together. It should be separate into work experience, and then the next section would be leadership experience. So this example uses the position location format versus the previous example, which used the company position format. And then regardless of what resume format you choose, either is okay. You should be consistent in the way that you're using the format. So for example, if you choose to write out the entire name of your school, or you choose to put the name of your position first and then the location, you should be doing that throughout your entire resume. And then you'll see here below, I marked a part of my resume where I didn't have the full name of my university written out, which was the format that I had decided to use for this resume. So I wasn't being consistent with my format. And then this is another example from one of my recent resumes. It uses a more specific title slash header category that's actually related to the specific job position that I was applying to at that time. And this resume uses a different format to structure information than the previous two resumes did. And it specifically includes all relevant job experience completed at one location in one section. And then it uses the location, position, and department format. So I have the university where I completed my work experience, and then the name of the position, and then the specific department where I completed that position. And for CVs, you can use the same formats that I mentioned. For your research or teaching experience, pretty much everything or most of what I talk about in this session will be applicable for resumes and CVs, even though most of my examples are using resumes. So for CVs, your publication section should be using the bibliographic citation format that's appropriate or common in your specific academic field. For conferences, you list the name of the presentation first, and then the name of the conference itself, and then the month and the year that you gave the presentation. For honors and awards, you list the name of the award, and then the organization, or government, or university, or whoever that gave you the award, and then the month and the year that you received the award. For CVs, you can use the just like I mentioned before, you can use the same format. This also works for resumes if you decide to include an honors or award section in your resume, which I'll get to later. That's an additional qualification that you might add to your resume if it's applicable to you. So, like I just mentioned, there are more things that you can add to a resume or a CV to show an employer or the university that you're applying to or the department that you're applying to that you're a good fit for them. And so everything you see here on the slide are all of the other things that you can include on your resume or your CV beyond education and job experience. And like I mentioned earlier, some of these are more expected for CVs, specifically like awards, professional training, and professional affiliations. For resumes, like I mentioned earlier, these things you can actually include in your resume. They would just be additional qualifications, and you would have to make sure that they fit into that 1 to 2 page limit. So volunteering is a very common category to add to resumes. Volunteering is a way to show engagement with your career field and your interest in that field. It's also a good way to get professional experience and expand your professional network. For CVs, this is what is referred to as professional or university or department service, which is any unpaid volunteer work that you've done that's specifically related to your field of study. So as an example, my field of study is international education, and last year I was a conference proposal reviewer for a very well-known international education conference hosted in the US, but um, accepts attendees and presenters worldwide. And so this is something that I would list as volunteer experience on a resume, or if I was writing out a CV, that is something that I would list as professional service. Honors and awards can be used to show high achievement in a specific area of knowledge and that you are an accomplished individual. Ideally, the awards you list should be relevant to your field of study and to show research and teaching experience for CVs. If you received any money through these awards, listing the award amount is optional, but it's something that you can add for this section if you want to add the specific award amount received. If you have a project that you completed for a client or a project that received some kind of award, that is also something that you can include in your resume. I've heard of applicants attaching some sort of like physical evidence to their project or physical evidence of their project. So for example, like a final report or a research project abstract once it's published to the resumes as supplemental material. It's not necessary, but it can help you stand out from other applicants. If you do decide to send supplemental materials to universities, you should definitely check their website or even call and email if they don't have this information on their website for their policy on sending supplemental materials in the university application phase, because there are universities that will explicitly state on their website that they will not accept supplemental materials and they will not consider or look at any supplemental materials sent to them during the application process. So travel experience is also not necessary to include in resumes. Um, this is optional, but it's something you want to consider. And if you're going into a field or a job that asks for international experience or experience living, working, or studying abroad, or a field would that you perceive would benefit from some sort of internationalized component. And then for a travel experience, you would add like the list of countries you've lived in, you've worked in, or studied in. Some people also include countries where they visited as tourists, so you can include personal travel as well, in addition to any academic or professional travel. Skills is a very common and broad category that's often included on resume specifically, and it's used to categorize and list and highlight different skill sets that you might have, including certifications and languages. So, for example, some skills are very common skill set might be software skills, language skills, and any certifications and licenses. And like I said, for CVs, you'll already most likely be including certifications and licenses anyway as a part of your um, professional training component of your CV. Soft skills are personality traits that are considered to be more subjective and harder to quantify, which means that they're harder to prove using any like tests or certifications. But they are something that more universities and more employers are starting to pay attention to when they go through resumes and decide who to interview or who to accept. The skills referenced in above the in this slide, so like the software skills, the languages, the certifications, those are called hard skills, which are skills that can be proven through tests or certifications. You can include soft skills on your resume; it's optional, but I would recommend having this as a separate category from your hard skills like software, languages, any like certifications and licenses. That should be separate from your soft skills. It's also to it's also okay to include coursework as well on resumes, and this can be included for students so long as the coursework shows that you have knowledge that's relevant to your field of study or relevant to the actual job position that you're applying for. So you should definitely be thoughtful about which courses you want to include in your resume. Since it's only 1 to 2 pages long, you obviously shouldn't be including every single class you've taken, especially if you're using the resume to apply to universities because you'll be giving them your transcript anyway. If you take in relevant coursework outside of the university you studied at, then you can also include that as well. And that also might be something you would include in your education section, especially if you like studied abroad while you're completing your degree for a significant period of time, so like a minimum of a semester, for example. And then an example of a course that you might include from a foreign university. Um, for example, I took a foreign language course at a university in Norway. And so this is something that I might include in the coursework section, especially if it's for a position related to my specific field of study, which is, like I mentioned earlier, international education, because it's often required and expected that applicants have experience traveling, studying, or working abroad. And so that is something that I could include to show applicants that I have experience studying with a university outside the US. Coursework isn't something that many people add to their professional documents. And if they do, like I mentioned, it's usually something that you only see in a resume and not in a CV. If you do see coursework in a CV, it's because the applicant taught that course or they were a teaching assistant for that course, as opposed to a student enrolled in the course. So this is an example of the additional qualifications that I usually add to my resumes. So notice that the skills category has multiple specific subcategories like language, research, management. And instead of listing my coursework as coursework, I've listed it as trainings. And then the last part of this presentation will be about describing your job or your research or teaching experience in writing. So, how do you write those description points? So, when you're describing your job or research or your teaching experience, you should only be using 3 to 5 bullet points that are composed of very short, simple sentences that describe your position. And they should always start with a verb. And then if you're currently in that position, it should be a present tense verb. Obviously, if you've already completed the position, it should be a past tense verb. Each bullet point should have a different verb, and you should always use numbers when possible. So, for example, if you have experience teaching, you'll want to add the number of students you've had enrolled in your courses that you taught, for example. You should also add context and emphasize results when possible. A common strategy for writing descriptions is to use the language of the job application and the job or assigned task. For university applications, this isn't as relevant since it's not a job, you're applying to a university, but you should definitely consider looking at the mission and the vision statements of the university, as well as any admissions evaluation criteria, if they have that available on their website. So, for example, Stanford's Graduate School of Business evaluates applicants, or one of their um, evaluation criteria is evaluating applicants based on how they lead. So, in your resume or CV description, you should be finding ways to highlight your leadership capabilities and then the outcomes or the results of your leadership if you have leadership experience. And then this is an example of what not to do when you're writing your descriptions. This is just like an extremely long paragraph that describes the position, but this is way too long and unlikely to be read by anyone reviewing your resume or CV, especially if you're applying for jobs. This is not something that would get read. However, if you do have trouble writing descriptions using the bullet point format, you can start off by writing about the experience in the long paragraph format and then seeing where you can take certain sentences from the paragraph and then turn those into bullet points for your resume or for your CV. So this is more so the format you want your descriptions to look like. It should start off with a verb and provide context by describing, or at least in the first box, I provided context by describing how I supported or how I expanded the publication that I was the managing editor for. This section, the first box, can be improved by making sure all of the verbs are different. So you'll see if you'll see closely, I used one of the verbs twice. So you should make sure all the verbs are different and that you're not repeating any verbs. And you should also be including numbers where possible. So you'll see that there are some bullet point or there are a lot of bullet points or where I didn't include numbers where I actually could have included numbers. So for example, the bullet point on managing the back end of the publication process could be changed to managing the back end of the publication process for 2 biannual issues or managing the back end of the publication process for 18 or 30 authors, for example. And then the point on um, expanding the publication could be changed to increasing the number of prospective contributors through marketing and research strategies. And then when I go back to my resume and update it, I can add the number of new authors at the end of my position. I can also improve the editing and reviewing bullet point by adding a number before author. So the first bullet point in the second yellow box is really what you want your descriptions to sound like when you review them, and then read them back to yourself. It should include the number of, or in this bullet point example, it includes numbers. So it includes the number of interviews and the number of focus groups that were conducted. It includes the context that these interviews were done in and how they were done as well. And then it starts off with a verb. Okay, so I talked a lot about a lot of different things in this presentation. And then the four takeaways that you should remember are the main parts of your resume, which are your contact info, experience, and your additional qualifications. Or if you choose to write a CV, your six main components, your education and contact information, research, teaching experience, publications and presentations, awards, training, affiliation, and service. Second, make sure all of your descriptions are short, simple, and start with a verb. Add numbers, context, and results when possible. Third, do research into what formats are common in your field and find what format works best for you personally. And then last, keep a master resume. Master resumes are, they include all of your relevant work and all of your relevant volunteering experience, any certifications you've received, any licenses, any languages, awards. Your master resume includes all of that information in one document. And having a master resume will make it easier for you to write resumes and CVs for applications because you can go back to your master resume and then literally just copy and paste what information you want to be on your resume or your CV, and then edit it and reformat it for that specific job or the specific university that you're applying to. Your resumes or CV should be, like I just mentioned, tailored to the specific university or job that you're applying to. And your master resume it should be a separate document from your resume or CV that you're using to apply to your universities. So like always, there's our contact information. You can, if you have questions after this session, you can reach out to either my supervisor, Donna Nakayeva, through WhatsApp at +1 701 266 9680, or email at dnakaeva@educationusa.org. Or you can reach out to me through WhatsApp at +7 705 95 7408, or through email at qtownsend@middlebury.edu. And like always, you can scan the QR code for extra resources and information. The extra resources for this session include um, extra resources for how to write resumes and how to write CVs, what are the differences between the two, and then some resume format websites or CV format templates that you can look at as first steps if you haven't, or you if this is your first time either writing a resume or writing a CV. And then like always, I'll have the slides and the video for this session in the folder as well after this session is over. And so the last session for this week is about requesting strong recommendation letters. And then next week, we'll be starting the motivational letter writing series. And that will be starting July 3rd with a session on understanding what a motivational letter is. The next session after that will be focused on understanding the structure of a motivational letter. And then the last session will be focused on strategies for writing motivational letters and talking about how to write a motivational letter in general. And then these are all of the presentations for both this week and for next week. Okay, thank you for joining the presentation, the session, and for listening. If you have any questions, you can post them in the chat now.